Hi everyone, I want to share with you a dramatic endgame played today in the Tata Steel tournament. Arvind Chithambaram played the white pieces and Tai Van Nguyen had the black pieces. If we look at the starting position, black has a winning advantage. The reason is because white's b6 pawn is overextended and black will win it with his knight. The knight is currently guarding the b7 and f5 pawns, so black's plan is to first defend these pawns with bishop c6 and king to f6, and then win the b6 pawn with knight c8 and knight takes b6. And there's really nothing white can do to stop it. White can't move their pawns and the king is stuck, and there's no real way to defend this b6 pawn. If they try knight to a4, then black can take it out with the bishop and then win the pawn. So it seems like all white can do is shuffle back and forth and watch black win the pawn and hope that he can still hold. But there's another critical factor in this game, which is the time situation. You can see that at this moment, black had only a little over a minute on the clock, so all the moves would basically have to come on the increment. Now, the time might not matter so much if black could just easily win the pawn and shuffle around, build some increment, but if there was a time to strike, now would be it. And white decides to spring to life with knight takes b7, sacrificing a knight for 2 pawns. It is interesting that the computer will call this a mistake, but chess is a game played with humans here, and against another human with only a minute on the clock, knight takes b7 is undoubtedly the best try. Black now tries to trade the bishops, and white wisely refuses. So next, black goes to collect the b-pawn with the king, and white needs to quickly make some counterplay on the other side of the board, because if black gets the b-pawn and can consolidate, then they'll just have the extra piece for nothing. So white again springs forward with e4. Black defends the pawn, and now white can bring their king in the game. Not only to e4 advance the pawn, but it liberated a path for the king. So after white pushes forward with king to e3, black now continues going for the b-pawn with king to c6. The line between a win, loss, and draw for black is very thin, and with so little time, he had to be feeling a lot of pressure. White now begins going for the g4 pawn with bishop to f5. And black is just in a horrible spot with only a minute left. The only winning move here for black is to play bishop takes f5. And this would allow white to potentially get 2 connected passed pawns. Now, black can take on b6, and after king to f4, black needs to now deal with this f-pawn that could go running down the board if he's not careful, but must first bring the king back in, since knight d6 right away to deal with the knight would allow king e5 into e6. So black needs to start with king to c6, and if white plays king takes g4, black can play knight to d6 and actually set up a blockade with the king and knight. And if white continues forward with king to e5, trying to get into e6, black should deny this and actually be willing to give up the d5 pawn. And stunningly, this is still winning for black, even though he is sacrificing these pawns. And black has the idea that after knight to d6, he is either going to go knight takes f5 into knight takes g3, or knight b5 into knight takes c3, and white can't defend both sides. Black will either get a passed g-pawn or a passed c-pawn. And with just a minute left, these details must have been nearly impossible to work out, and so black decides to play it safe with bishop f7, because if sacrificing these pawns doesn't work out, it could actually be losing. It could potentially be losing, so he tries to just hold the position with bishop to f7, and now white pushes the e-pawn, securing a protected passed pawn. Black finally rounds up the b6 pawn, is up a knight for a pawn at the moment, but the g4 pawn is going to be doomed. White decides first to go with king to f4, saying that this pawn can be taken at any time, but wants to improve the king first. Black now brings their king back into the action with king to c7, and after king to g5, black actually makes the losing mistake in this game, but the saving idea was so obscure. The only way was to take this b7 knight and bring it 4 moves on a journey to e4. With the time ticking down the clock and the pawns rushing forward, though, this is all but an impossible idea to find, to think that you could have time for this. And so black brings the knight the other way, but this turns out to be the game-losing mistake. White takes the g4 pawn, and after bishop to e6, white again denies the trade, and now the path is set forward for white to continue with king to f6 and begin rushing both the pawns. Black tries to set up a blockade with bishop to h3 and knight to e6, but the g-pawn now begins going after black moves the knight because it was being attacked because the bishop can no longer defend it. White plays the final move of the game, which is e6. After this move, black resigned. This is because the only way for black to stop the e-pawn would be to give the knight for it. If they try with the king, well, it doesn't help because the bishop can go the other direction, and this would be checkmate. So black would have to give the knight, and then the g-pawn would just win for white. So I think the starting position here is the most interesting. Even after this point, a computer would call a move like knight takes to b7 a mistake. It does serve as a great reminder of the human element of the game that we all play, and that it was practically the best thing for white to do, especially considering the time situation. Thank you for watching, and make sure you subscribe to the channel for future videos.